Today's video is how to find the equation of a graphed line. Now, with the equation of a graphed line, we want to make sure everything is in slope-intercept form once we identify the slope and once we identify the y-intercept. And if you remember, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b, where slope is m, or the coefficient or number in front of x as a fraction or a whole number, and the b value is the y-intercept, or the starting point on the y-axis. When if you were graphing the line from an equation, that's where the line would cross the y-axis. So we are going to go over 5 examples of how we could find the slope and the y-intercept of a graphed line in order to put it as a linear equation in slope-intercept form as y equals mx plus b. So let's look at the first example. The first example we have is here. So we know we want everything to go into y equals mx plus b form, where the slope and the y-intercept will be replaced. So we want to be able to find the slope of this line and the y-intercept of this line. So the easiest thing to identify first is where the line crosses the y-axis. And if you remember where the y-axis is, it's the line that is straight up and down here. And if you would go follow the y-axis, you would see that the line crosses the y-axis at this point right here. Now, the coordinates of the point are not nearly as important as what it actually is. So we have a -4 on the y-axis, so we know that our y-intercept is going to be -4. So the other way is to find the slope, and what you can do, and what I usually do, is I follow the line, and everywhere it crosses the coordinate plane perfectly on the grid, you want to put points. So you can see there's a point there, a point at -2, 0, a point at -3, -2, a point at -4, +4. So, and you can see that they're evenly spaced and they all have the same slope. And if you can remember back to how we did our finding the slope of graphed lines, you will take a vertical line at any one point, just go at the point that's at -3, -2, and I'm going to put a vertical line there, and I'm going to put a horizontal line at -2, 0. And what we want to be able to do is identify the rise and the run of this line. Now, first thing we can look at is and see that the blue line travels down as it goes from left to right. Any line that goes down as you go from left to right is going to be a negative slope. So we'll go ahead and put our negative right there. And then we're going to go ahead and count and see what the rise was. How much up and down did we go? And we went down 2. Went down 2. And then we go right 1. So it was +1. So we have a -2 over a +1. So we know our slope would be -2 over +1. However, we know that would simplify to -2. So now that we know what our slope is and what our y-intercept is, we can plug them into our slope-intercept form equation. And we would now know that the equation is y equals slope -2x, and the y-intercept is -4, so we'll put -4. So the slope-intercept form of the first graph line is y equals -2x -4. So let's look at the next example. We see that our line crosses the y-axis at 0, 0. So again, we're trying to find y equals mx plus b. We need to identify the slope. We need to identify the y-intercept. And we see that the y-intercept is actually 0. So if we would follow the line, and we would see that the line crosses at 5, 1, but also crosses at 5, -1. So we can choose any of those two slopes, or any of those 2 points to find our slope. So I'm going to start at the far left at the -5, -1, and draw my vertical line. And then I'm going to go to 0, 0, and draw my horizontal line. So from there, we can find our rise over our run. Now, we know as the line travels from left to right, this one is going up. So we are going to have a positive slope with this one. And we can identify what the rise is by how far it goes up. We see that it goes up +1. And we see that it goes right, or our run, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is a +5. And we want to rise over our run, and we would have a +1/5. So now we can write this in slope-intercept form of y equals, the slope goes in front of x, 1/5x. And since our y-intercept is 0, I tell my students that the number 0 represents nothing, so there's nothing to put after the x. So your equation is y equals 1/5 x. Next example. Again, we are doing everything in slope-intercept form. We want to identify our slope. We want to identify our y-intercept. So we see that it crosses the y-axis for our y-intercept at -5. Easiest one to find. Now we're going to go back onto our graph, and we're going to see that if we have a point here, a point here, a point here, a point here. Again, where those points are there because that is where it crosses the coordinate plane evenly, so we can identify a point there. It doesn't matter what 2 points we do. We want to use the points that are closest together because that way we don't have to simplify any further. So I'm going to choose the point at -4, +3 as our vertical line point. And I'm going to choose the point at -3, +1 as our horizontal line point. Again, we're using where those lines cross, and we want to identify the slope. Once again, as the line travels from left to right, we're seeing that it goes down, so we know that this is going to have a negative slope, and we see that it goes down to right 1, so the slope is -2/1. And just like our first equation, we would know, our first example, we would know that would come to -2 as our slope. So our slope would be -2, y-intercept is -5, so we will write the equation as y equals mx+b, but we would know that the slope and the y-intercept would be input to make it y equals -2x minus 5, since that is a -5, with a 2 being the slope, the -5 or the -5 being the y-intercept. Now, there are also examples that you will get that are like we see here. We know that our y-intercept crosses the y-axis, and at this point we see it crosses at the -1 value. So we know our y-intercept is going to be -1. However, we see that it also crosses straight across with all of these. Now, we know as the line travels from left to right, if it goes up, it is a positive slope. If it goes down, it's a negative slope. But if you can't remember, if you have a flat line, think of it as a tabletop. A tabletop does not slope. It's flat. Your floor in your classroom or your kitchen, wherever you may be, or a basketball court, it is flat. It has no slope. So since there is no slope, it's going to be 0 for our slope. Now, when we place it into y equals mx+b form, you would see that we have y equals 0x minus 1, but we also know that anything times 0 is nothing, so that would make it y equals 0 minus 1, because it didn't matter what the value of x was, you'd be multiplying it by 0, so the answer would be 0, and we know that y equals, or when we have our y equals 0 minus 1, we know that 0 minus 1 would be -1. So the equation for this line that has no slope would just be y equals -1. Last example is the one that it's not really the hardest, but it may be the most confusing. We have a line that goes straight up and down. As we've discussed in previous videos, you know that if a line does not travel from left to right, but only goes up and down, you cannot define the slope. And anything that has a slope that you cannot define is just an undefined slopes. This is an undefined slope, or this slope is undefined. So we know that we don't even have a y-intercept. If you look at the y-axis, there is no y-intercept. But if it's not traveling from left to right, it's only a vertical line that goes straight up and down, you won't be dealing with the y value at all. You're going to be looking at where it crosses the x-axis. In this case, we see that it crosses at +4. And if you look, all of the x values are at +4 with this one too. So what you will do, anytime that you have a vertical line that goes straight up and down, it does not travel left to right, you are just identifying what the x value is, because the x value will never change. The y value, doesn't matter what the y value is, the x value will always be the same. So anytime you have a vertical line that does not go left to right, you're going to write an undefined slope or undefined line as x equals 4, because you're only identifying the x value because that is the only constant through everything. Hopefully these help you. If you have any questions, just ask. If you have any suggestions, or you want me to go over any other types of mathematical equations, lines, anything in algebra or below, let me know. I will make a video for that, and hopefully it will make sense for all of you. So I hope this helps, and I hope you can use this any way you can in your classes.